Hi, I'm Cindi McGee, and you're watching Polymer Clay TV. Today's veneer or slab was inspired by this gorgeous fabric that I found, which was designed by Dan Morris, and it's called Kashmir. I'm using white Primo Sculpey for the base of this slab. I've conditioned and rolled it to a setting number 4 on my Atlas machine. To add the mottled creamy beige background, I'm using some yellow ochre pan pastel, and I'm applying it with a round sponge. You could use any kind of sponge to do this. I wanted it a little darker in some places and some variation in the color. It's almost a tea-stained effect. To add the larger focal mandalas, I'm using the Lotus Flower Mandala silkscreen from createalong.com. Placed it with the turquoise side down. You just want to place the brighter color side face down. And I like to give it a little roll just to sort of make sure it'll stay in place a bit better while I'm screening. To add the colorful autumn-toned mandalas, I'm using 4 shades of DecoArt Americana Decor multi-surface satin paints. I'm using cocoa bean, brown sugar, deep turquoise, and paprika. I did a little experimenting with this slab and different ways to add the multicolors of paint to the silk screen. The first one I tried was using the same round sponge. I applied the colors and then sponged them over the silk screen. For the second one, I tried a little different way to do it, and I used individual pieces of sponge for the different colors and added the color that way. Next, I used a more traditional application and applied the paint to my scraper tool and silk screened right over it that way. I finished off covering the surface sort of in random places with that technique. And then I washed my silk screen right away after each attempt at adding the color to make sure that the paint didn't dry and it would be ready to use next time. Once all the first mandalas were dry, I came back and I'm using the Henna Lily silkscreen from Create Along, and I chose one of the larger lilies, and I'm going to silkscreen with the same colors of paint randomly here and there in some of the open areas. This just gives us a second size of mandala on the background. Once those were dry, I came back and I'm using the same Henna Lily screen and the same colors of paint, but I'm going to add some of the small images from that screen into some of the open areas. And I'm using a stiff paintbrush to apply the paint this time because they are such small images to screen. And I've got tight areas to get them into. For the next set of details, I'm using one of the texture tips that came in my last Create Along box. This is a brand new product from createalong.com. There are different sets of them in different shapes. And I'm actually going to use paint and dip the texture stick into the paint colors and then stamp it into the clay in some of the open areas on the slab. So here is the finished veneer at this point, and it's really quite beautiful just as it is. But I decided to add some coordinating clays and cut it into shapes and make a bit more of a detailed slab with it. Next, I conditioned and rolled out some burnt umber, and I think this is sweet potato, Sculpey Primo, to a setting number 2 on the clay machine. My Cindy's Peacock's texture mat for the first one, and I'm going to just roll over it and apply the texture to the burnt umber. And then I'm using a Medallions rubber stamp that came from Create Along in one of the Create Along boxes in the past to texture the other color. You could use pumpkin or cinnamon if you don't have this sweet potato. Next, I used the medium ruffled kiss cutter from Create Along to cut out several of the shapes from the 2 different textured sheets of clay. And I also cut them out from the mandala clay that we just made. For the backing sheet, I used a piece of white Primo Sculpey that I rolled to a setting 2, I think it is, on my clay machine, and I covered it with some raw umber pan pastel. This really isn't going to show, so you could just use brown clay also. I arranged all of the different cut pieces out in a pattern on that background sheet. And I extruded some peacock pearl Primo Sculpey with my extruder and a multi-hole disc. And I'm going to take these individual strands and outline each of the shapes. Once I have all of my outline down, I'm coming back and I'm using some DecoArt metallic luster, and I'm going to start with some copper kettle and just a light application over the coppery sweet potato clay, and it'll highlight the texture from the stamped image. Then I used my iced espresso metallic luster and highlighted the textured area on the burnt umber pieces. Metallic luster adds a great touch of shimmer and sheen to it and highlights the textured areas really well. And now this veneer is ready to create some really unique jewelry or cover a box or a journal cover or make some polymer trading coins. I'm really pleased with how it came out. For more inspiration, join our Polymer Clay Tribe Facebook page. Over 17,000 members sharing projects every day. For lots more creative polymer clay ideas, visit the Polymer Clay TV blog.